You're helping people understand how to be top performers while creating, real business competitive advantage as well. That's a good thing for the world.
Every leader needs a trusted partner for the moments that matter. This Bold Business Podcast conversation is that partnership. Here is your host, Jess Duell, an insightful truth teller who serves as the catalyst for getting the right work done and who asks the questions that truly matter.
So we know companies rigorously measure financial capital. Yet we also know through direct experience, indirect experience, and the way we feel that companies struggle to measure the true value of each of their individual team members and maybe even themselves. So you're tuned in to the Bold Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Jess Duell. This conversation, as well as every conversation on this podcast, is to spark an idea, to get right down to business that we need right now without losing track of your long-term business strategy, staying engaged to the way that you want to grow so that you can make the right decisions right now. We're getting real, really real about what it takes to break past your operational ceilings. I'm joined by Jacob Chase, a former Wall Street banker turned entrepreneur and the founder of The Infin. He's building a disruptive technology that ties individual contribution directly to business performance to strengthen cultural integrity. In this episode, we are going to unpack 3 key takeaways to how to support team development by measuring intangible contributions, why feedback empowers your people while driving stakeholder value, and what it truly takes to be relentless in seeking clarity. What is the core outcome that Infin is offering?
It's offering real transparency into how your contribution is viewed by everyone you're working with. And it's not just an HR review type measurement, it's an actual quantifiable, what is your impact on the business results? And is that greater than what you're being paid? Or what is your path to making more if your contribution is greater than what you're being paid? That type of transparency hasn't been at the forefront of people's thinking before. And it can cause some apprehension or some real interest depending on where you sit.
I'm a believer in potential. If I'm thinking about a SWOT, potential for me is not in the strength and weakness side. Potential for me is in the opportunity and threat side. Are you coming inside where there's an opportunity to increase a weakness? Sure. Where you leverage strength? Sure. The actual potential, though, for growth is outside of that. When we know clearly what we are providing and the value that work is actually bringing, it allows us to find the shape and where the potential is. And do we focus more risk or more reward? Do we stay close? Do we go far? Do you view it that way?
Ultimately, the value you are bringing is very domain specific. You may be a superstar top performer in one area, but then if you're transported into a different area, some of the things in which you make an impact on just don't apply. Having the transparency into where and how your contribution is most highly valued gives you the insights that you need in order to keep pressing on the right levers.
So really, is one of the goals to change corporate structures and modernize them?
I think we've all experienced frustrations with typical review processes, heavy lift, and the lack of real actionability, but we haven't discovered anything better that solves core issues. But people still want feedback. They want to grow. They want to develop their careers. They want to apply themselves. You just got to give them the insights to tap into their intrinsic motivation rather than control them through a centralized process.
Yeah, I know that we are in a place where one size fits all rarely works anymore.
Sure.
I'm not going to say that it doesn't, because every single time we go to our tea place of choice or we're on the go and we're going to end up eating out, there are things that we have done to optimize there. And I do believe there's a commonality of where we have a baseline, which I would say is what's my common ground? And then building from that. Do you see it as the same, or am I drifting off somewhere?
I think one of the core principles here is alignment, where the individual interest, like the self interest, has to align with the interest of the bigger picture. in order to get everyone working together and collaborating in the same direction. Ultimately, I think that alignment really is shareholder value. How are you maximizing the value of the organization and then aligning yourself with the work that you do in order to maximize your own self interest in alignment with that? And I think that's the underlying principle that is still very valid. It creates that common ground you mentioned to get everyone swimming in the same direction.
Is there a fear of creating new operational drag when we think about peer assessed value contribution? Because if you and I are working together and one day I'm mad at you and we think about the stock market, there's an emotional element to that. I'm guessing it's more of a trend, not a day by day or hour by hour or minute by minute kind of approach that you're taking. So, alignment is for the purpose of everybody moving in the same direction. And I'm guessing there's either fear around what could the side effects be, or just a little bit of the unknown. Like, I can't imagine us being there if I'm high up in an organization based off of where we're at today.
You brought
Yeah.
up the stock market analogy. There's interesting aspects of that where there's a multitude of diverse perspectives, all driven by self interest that combine to establish a market price at any given moment. People change their perspectives all the time. Prices reflect that as well. In the peer assessment approach that we have, it aggregates all of the diverse perspectives about each individual's performance. And so you may have a negative interaction with one person, but is that the prevailing opinion? And the changes in the stock market price are moderated appropriately from that perspective. The other thing is that people gossip and they talk and they have opinions and they share those opinions intuitively anyway.
Yeah.
Capturing that in an anonymous way protects the person who has the opinion while still providing the feedback to the person who needs to hear it. One of the things I think a lot of leaders struggle with is enabling their teams to have those hard conversations because that information needs to be shared, but it's a constant struggle to get people to overcome emotional resistance points, but you still want the recipient to get that information. Can you lower the barriers to providing that difficult feedback such that it flows more freely? I think the answer is yes.
I love how you're describing this in the sense of it's not just one instance, it's many instances. It's not just one interaction, it's perceptions that are out there. So, sure, being able to have these hard conversations, distill it, one person still has to be the bearer of the news. So, what matters most to the person who has to receive the news? This could be negative, neutral, or great. Sometimes people are not good at receiving good news either.
Sure.
Hard conversations could be the positive.
It's like the price is the news. Like that is
Mhm.
the aggregate opinion. No one
Okay.
necessarily has to deliver it and nobody has to be the bearer of it. The recipient of it sometimes has to interpret the price, if you will. A lot of times in traditional assessments, you have a bunch of different categories. You have a rating scale for each category to build up into an assessment. In a decentralized assessment, you're adding a collective intelligence to produce the price, and then you are finding the details about the components that make up that value. And so if you rate really highly, you have to get the feedback as to why. If you rate really poorly, you have to get the feedback as to why, instead of gathering the feedback first and then establishing your value from that.
Feeling stuck? Like, what got you here won't get you there. The pressure to grow is on, yet the path isn't clear yet. You don't have to walk that path alone. This is the Bold Business Podcast. Like and subscribe wherever you listen. Your host, Jess Duell, is the strategic partner you've been looking for, asking the questions that truly matter. It's time to break the inertia and get the perspective you need to make your next move.
This is the Bold Business Podcast, and the guest today is Jacob Chase, founder and CEO of The Infin. I'm thinking of your decentralized system tells me what I am worth, and that it doesn't take into account what my goals are, if I have stated them or written them down, and what I think I am worth. So the hard conversation actually isn't the delivery of the news, it's the helping to have the support of the gap. It changes the hard conversation. So, me, if it's just me, the one, whatever that is, and there's a discrepancy, somebody's going to need to sit down with me and say, this is our culture here, and there is a gap, and this is where it is. Or we know you can meet us here because we believe in you.
You can't have a decentralized system and then totally absolve management and leadership, supporting people in their
Yeah.
growth
Okay.
and development. We constantly need leadership and mentorship as we develop our own careers to help us along the way. But what those leaders can be enabled with is they're not the messenger anymore. They're helping
Right.
to interpret.
Yep.
They aren't the ones delivering the negative feedback because the collective assessment system has already delivered that. This is the aggregate of what everyone thinks. Now let me talk to my manager about what to do about it, what it means, and how to improve, rather than relying on them as the channel to hear the feedback from everyone else. An important distinction there that enables those conversations to happen more easily.
Supporting team member growth changes from a task and challenge to understanding and making sure alignment is the best for each person on that team. I'm thinking about being able to grow together.
Another important point that you made is, what if it doesn't align with how I value myself or I view my
Yeah.
own performance?
Yeah.
One of the important attributes of a decentralized assessment system is that you can't separate value from the system of which it is a part. Value is only measured by the system of which it is a part. If you're a really high performer on your team and your company's doing great, your value may be one level. But if you're on a desert island by yourself, your contribution, your value is different. It has to be connected to the results of the overall system. That's an important way to link individual contribution to business results and start putting dollars to assessment systems where you can quantify impact in a
Mhm.
way that I don't think you can do with the traditional system.
Where I wanted to go really is in the way that we get in our own way. We get in our own way in our own role. We get in our own way as the leader. Traditionally, it's like, ooh, we're big enough. We need this now. We're going to just clomb it on and bolt it on there. And hopefully it works out okay. And because it is what it is, we'll just make the best of it. And being able to redesign the system with which work is done is more important today than ever before. And we're finding that in our tech stacks. We're finding that in our decision making. We're
Sure.
finding that in disruption. And so it feels like a really good time, not to say, hey, let's add more to all of this stuff that we have going on, to say we're already reimagining. Can we reimagine what we want to be doing? And how can this support us as we're making?
Totally. This is a pretty disruptive moment in all of our
Yeah.
careers.
Yeah.
Another thing that's happening where I think this is growing in importance is individual contribution is stratifying. People who are really diving into the technology tools and the AI capabilities are growing their own personal impacts in a way that is making them more and more valuable relative to the people who may not be diving in as much. And being able to see that and to measure it and to quantify it is only becoming more and more important. And so I think it's almost going to demand an ability to rethink some of these valuation practices.
How are you applying this in your own organization as you grow?
Yeah, we use it, right? We dog food it with the results that we would expect. It's like there's an important incentive switch that I think is a little bit undervalued,
Huh.
where in a traditional centralized kind of review process, there are clear and specific things you need to adhere to gain favor or value or self promote. And there's an incentive a little bit to maybe hold down competition, create a little bit of a political environment because there is a centralized assessment. But in a decentralized assessment, the way that you gain value is by serving your teams, by serving the people you work with, by being a good colleague, being reliable, the intangibles that really matter for high team performance. The incentive is really pro social. And we've experienced that in my current company, in my previous company, when we were rolling out these type of programs. And it has a dramatic impact almost instantly with how people show up to work every day.
Do you have an exact example you could share with us?
I was working with a client who wanted to understand the impact of a leader on the team that didn't necessarily have the statistical performance of some of their colleagues, but they were recognized as a leader and an important member of the team, even though their underlying data, and this is a sports team, this was a sports application, the underlying data didn't necessarily support it. If you have a traditional centralized structure that is only on field performance data, it missed some of the important selflessness that this individual was giving to the team. And when we ran this kind of decentralized analysis, it was very clear that their contribution was very important to the team, even though it wasn't captured in the on field performance data. And so the incentive, and when people saw this and they saw how this person showed up and they saw how important that rating was in everyone else's view, helped them realize that giving to the team in these other ways was more important than their on field performance. And it created a team dynamic that was really positive beyond just the statistical performance.
What makes you passionate about this? Is it part of leadership that you didn't like? Is it something you want to do better as a leader today? Is it something else altogether?
There's two reasons. The first reason as to why I got interested in this. I was running a real estate business a couple years ago and we had 150 people and I'm losing a little bit of visibility into who's making a difference and who's performing. We had an accounts payable clerk who was a rock star by reputation, by results, way above their job description, cultural torchbearer, showed up in ways we really wanted to promote. And the job market said his role was worth $55,000 a year. But I knew that just didn't represent the impact that he was making. And so it felt very unfair for the company paying him what we were based on the contribution he was making. And so that's what really set me on the path of trying to figure this out. There's a fairness element, there is a distribution of resources element that's really important to me of the best people who are showing up in the right way. They need to be rewarded appropriately. And to create a dynamic where that is measurable and is fair, I think promotes a lot of the right behaviors and incentives that businesses want to see anyway. And it also enables the individual to have more ownership and agency and autonomy into their own personal results. There's the empowering the individual side, but also what we're seeing in a lot of our implementations is there's a ton of waste. There's a lot of people who are being paid for non-performance. And there's a lack of efficiency from a business perspective that needs to be addressed. I think coming at it from both sides aligns with some meritocratic ideals that I have. It feels really good to bring a tool like that to the world where you're helping people understand how to be top performers while creating real business competitive advantage as well. I think that's a good thing for the world.
I want to know more about that.
There's a little bit of a political comparison between communism and capitalism.
Okay.
History over the last 70 or 80 years has shown that if you empower people with autonomy and freedom, they're going to make good things happen. And I think that same principle can be distilled down to within an organization. We all want to enable our teams to take initiative, to take the risks that are going to make a difference. But you
Mhm.
have to have a real system of measurement and reward allocation within that to keep the wheels on the bus. And I think it's a big step forward in allowing companies to enable their people for top performance while incorporating safeguards of mitigating the risk of people doing stupid things too, because there's a shared accountability, a shared upside and downside. When people have real skin in the game, they make decisions commensurate with their own risk tolerance and optimizes for what each person is willing to do without forcing anything, without centralizing it, without controlling it in an unnecessary way.
So when you say centralized, there's a strong theme of too many rules that hold us back.
For sure.
It's easy to end up in a place of this is where I'm safe and these are all the rules that keep me here. And there is this concept of friction can be good so growth can occur without a whole bunch of pain and disaster along the way.
Sure.
We're talking in these broad strokes, and I appreciate that you called out fairness in the way of calling out fairness of, hey, this is the way our system works. This is the way large organizations work. They kind of want to change, even though for whatever reason they're changing it the way that they are. Some people might be saying, and they're not. And that feeling is real. Being able to have a new way to look at things and say, if we know what we want our culture to be, but our culture is defined by too many rules that people can't actually get anything done, whatever those rules are. And that's different than rules of engagement, I think. So I want to make a slight differentiation there. That might be a fun place to talk for just a second because we want to be able to creative. We want to make our job easier. We want to serve and get to the solution of our contribution in a bigger system organization than otherwise.
We talked a little bit earlier about alignment, and
Yeah.
the only real rule is rewards are based on increases in shareholder value. And it's tough for a business to argue with outside of you have to maintain compliance in a strict and centralized way. You have to legal up and up and those kind of things that those still have to be maintained centrally. But if I'm going to take initiative and my initiative is actually increasing the value of the organization, and that's really the only thing that I'm bound to, in an extreme sense,
Yeah.
then you know that you're never optimizing locally for your environment. You know, you're never doing things that are contrary to the organization's interest because it's against your own personal interest. And you can then feel a little bit more comfortable about enabling people to do things that, as long as it's increasing the value of the organization, should be granted. And that's the fundamental difference between capitalism and communism again. Whereas in the capitalistic society, you go do things, you have an economic incentive that grows the overall pie for everybody. It's like, great, do your thing. Whereas then if things get too rigid and controlled and structured, then growth gets stagnated on an individual and on a collective level.
If your week feels like you're being pulled from one demand to the next, this is for you. The daily grind is the #1 killer of business instinct, pulling you and your team away from your vision. Reclaim your strategic edge with the Present Retreat. This free guide from Red Direction is a simple, powerful framework to carve out the space you need, to filter out the noise, make the right decisions, and lead with clarity. Visit presentretreat.com.
I'm your host, Jess Duell. You're listening to the Bold Business Podcast. Today, I am talking to Jacob Chase, the founder and CEO of The Infin, where we are talking about empowering our teams and creating shareholder and stakeholder value. What's the biggest lie leadership teams are telling themselves when they hit these strategic ceilings and don't address the way they're making decisions or allocating salary resources?
Let me answer it from a personal perspective.
Okay.
I had this accounts payable clerk and I was trying to figure out what was he actually worth to our organization based on contribution. I had to realize and accept that I didn't have the answer myself, that my executive judgment wasn't enough to get the answer. And whatever process that a me executive wanted to put in place in order to get the information, it wasn't going to work because the value of this person was based on the opinion of everyone who was working with him and the value he added to them. And I was a few layers removed. I didn't depend on him for much directly. And so I wasn't the right person to judge that contribution.
Okay.
Carrying forward that logic, a decentralized assessment system is really an answer here that I have a viewpoint, but my viewpoint isn't the only one that matters. And it must be combined with the rest of the viewpoints in order to come up with a collective judgment. That's the core mistake that leadership often makes, thinking they know best rather than relying on the perspective of a lot more people in order to produce a collective judgment.
So the company Gore-Tex, they actually went to a decentralized organizational model back in the 90s. They were one of the earliest organizations that I had first heard of that did this and did it successfully. I'm like, wait, I've heard this before. I understand this before. Is there enough similarity that I can just say other people might have heard of this? This would be a great thing to bring in for some context to bring them up to speed quickly.
There's some unique features about the Gore-Tex culture that has enabled stability for a long period of time with this decentralized, no titles. You better take initiative and go do things in order to be integrated here that aren't really replicated in most other organizations. Gore-Tex has a certain element of leadership that has fostered this culture intentionally, and it's become stable. There's other examples early in Google's journey when they had a team of a couple hundred engineers and they decided, okay, no bosses, and it didn't work. The decentralization didn't have the core infrastructure to keep it stable. Our approach is trying to be that infrastructure that doesn't require the cultural adhesive to keep it sustainable.
I did not know when I brought this up that Gore-Tex was a unique scenario. I remember being excited when I read it, and every 2 or 3 years, it pops into my head because of some conversation that I'm having, and no wonder, it's the only one. Okay, got it.
There's not many that I'm aware of have really
Yeah. So
sustained that model for a long
yeah.
period.
So only one, meaning there's so few we don't know who they are yet. Any of you listening, please tell us because now I want to know. And we both want to talk to you. Would that be
Right.
fair to say, Jacob?
Totally.
So this actually is interesting because I'm thinking about relentless clarity, the pursuit of relentless clarity. And that means we have to have all of the time. And in a world where there's so much stress and so much attention and so much effort that it takes to just stay focused, how do companies, in your experience, and what do they gain from your decentralized system so that they can reduce the drag, they can reduce the fatigue when they're thinking about adding something like this and reimagining the way that they're working together and proving the value to the company?
So to the kind of this relentless clarity construct, a lot of it is making sure that you have current and accurate information about yourself. Is like making sure that you know the impact that you're having with everything that you're doing. Because right now, maybe I'm late to a meeting and everyone is really upset that they're sitting there for 10 minutes, but because I'm the boss, no one says anything and I just don't know any better and I'm not really paying that much attention and no one's telling. But if there's a system that I have that lets me know that was the response from that people's perception, and great, now I'm aware of it. Now I have greater clarity. Now I can do something about it because I just wasn't aware or wasn't focusing energy and attention there proportionate to the impact that it would have been having on others. As far as the aspect of a new system, a new platform, no one wants any of that right now. What you're really doing is you're getting rid of a major drag instead of our twice annual reviews that consume 2 weeks of people's time that completely distract us from our regular work. What instead you have is a very simple feedback loop of I'm going to input a couple observations that are very low touch, that is prompted to me by the system, that is completely contextual based on my relationship with this person, based on our jobs, our roles, our responsibilities. And in doing that, I also receive information about myself. There's a feedback loop that can be a couple minutes a day to keep the network current. What's the state of everyone's performance, as well as keeping me informed on those day to day things that matter and make a difference. Instead of a massive process that everyone hates and people don't know how to act from and get very temporary value from, you're replacing it with a very small daily habit of input a little bit of information, receive information about yourself while building kind of the full profile.
I'm thinking about what are the skills that you have found that are the hardest to measure, yet return the most value to a company and its stakeholders?
What's easy to measure and that most companies are doing very well is the tangible performance data. For a lot of roles, they're quantified in a way that gives some transparency in individual performance. Obviously, sales teams are the easy one. Other productivity roles, how many boxes are you putting on a shelf at Amazon, or how many invoices are you processing for payables, or how many customer service calls are you taking? Those kind of things are easily quantifiable. But what ultimately matters in team performance and measurements of contribution is the intangibles. How do you actually measure the things that aren't quantifiable, but as people, we see and interpret and appreciate or dislike that make an impact on work? Understanding those intangibles is where the real gains are to be made. You go back to the stock market analogy, appreciates the intangibles, where every company publishes its financial data every quarter, but two companies with the exact same P&Ls can have wildly different valuations based on the intangibles. Is the CEO a crook and are they in a dying industry? Or is the CEO a visionary, highly credible, great track record, and all those other things that are intangibles? The market captures that through the collective perception of all of the people buying and selling the shares. With a decentralized assessment system, you can capture those same intangibles. You can capture the measure of those same intangibles. And then you got to go get the feedback and the specifics as to exactly what they are. But when you can measure them and appreciate them for the impact that the intangibles are having, you can then either address the negative ones or promote the positive ones very directly. And those tend to have a much greater impact than just looking at the numbers of individual performance.
So I'm going to switch to your company and your company's growth right now.
Yeah.
And growing company, have you hit stalls? Have you hit some
Yeah.
stalls and what did you do to get through them?
Early on, we had a core construct. I
Mhm.
had my own personal experience using prototypes in previous organizations and built a software platform that I wanted. And it took a lot of iterating and discovering to figure out there were some differences that maybe I individually wanted, but the marketplace didn't necessarily. And there was some doldrums in there that just needed reps, that needed lots of exposure, lots of experience, lots of conversations to begin to hone the product in a way that was more appealing to the marketplace. And it's brutal. Like when you think you have something amazing and no one else wants it for a long period of time, really pushing through that, being very open to feedback, being very open to change, not being fixated on any ideal I had in my own mind was really important to adapting and evolving the product in a very positive way.
How does your team approach strategic decision making?
We try to be customer first, and we really want to understand what impact are any changes going to have on the customer and making sure that we're really being a customer led organization. We're not really of a scale where we're that concerned about competitive strategy yet. And so we're really able to stay nimble, stay close to the customer, and really enable that to pull us forward
Mm.
rather than pushing too much out in the marketplace right now.
So, how much time do you spend on your strategic work versus the other stuff? And what does that cadence look like for you?
I have dedicated calendar time each
Mhm.
week, Thursday mornings. I need to sit and think about these things for an hour or two. A couple members of my team have a similar type process where we'll come up with something in a meeting and say, all right, we need to individually stew on this and then collectively bring together our assessment of the problem. Me specifically, every Thursday at 8, go down the list is like, what's the most important thing that we need to address that requires kind of peace to think through. And that's a habit I've had for a few years now that I think is a really important one to not get lost in running the business and focus on the business.
Mine's Mondays. I do my strategic deep time on Mondays. Yeah, because if I don't, I'm like, Thursday's already full by 10 a.m. on Mondays if I'm not careful. So I love that yours is on Thursday and you can, and you've got that. I was like, Thursday, that's so neat. Maybe I
Well,
could try that. What would that look to be different? These small interruptions to even change our own thought patterns from being too stagnant.
I try to be intentional about matching my work with my energy. I find that I'm best prepared with a week's worth of
Oh, yeah.
things happening to then begin to synthesize that while I still have energy on Thursdays. That seems to work well for me.
That's awesome. I take a similar approach, and mine is it's gotta percolate and still have to walk away for a while for the things that I need to do to
Yeah.
come up. So, which is why mine ended up being on Mondays. So, I appreciate you sharing that, and then my adding to it so anybody listening can be like, "Find your way. It's all the right way."
I think it comes down to matching the task with your energy and trying to structure your calendar around that.
What makes it bold, Jacob, to reimagine culture and make sure our organizations stay focused on value to our stakeholders?
I think what makes it bold is the whole approach. It is a wholesale rethinking about how we evaluate and reward talent, linking it directly to business results and enabling individual autonomy to pursue it with their own initiative. I think is a bold change for an organization, one that we're seeing can unlock real step changes in performance. And I think that aligns very well with the boldness of this podcast.
And that brings us to the close of another powerful and fresh perspective on the Bold Business Podcast. In today's volatile landscape, growth is a double-edged sword. To truly thrive, you must engage with your strategy, not just react to the day-to-day. Without absolute alignment, your company faces a stark choice: outmaneuver or be outmaneuvered, grow or get left behind. Thank you for listening, and a special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production.